morning, you're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. The Supreme Court has rejected a review petition to relook at its decision on the definition of AGR or adjusted gross revenue for telecom companies. This effectively lands a death blow to the sector and in particular to Vodafone Idea, Bharti, Airtel. It's so bad that there is a chance that Vodafone Idea may have to shut shop. But first, a quick explainer. This is a 14-year-old case that has looked at the definition of what the revenue of telecom companies are, on which they pay license fees, spectrum charges and other charges. The Supreme Court last year ruled in favor of the Department of Telecom that wanted that base revenue on which all of these charges are calculated to be broader and include revenues of these companies apart from what they made providing core telecom services. The DOT won the case, which meant 15 companies have to pay about 1.47 lakh crore rupees by the 23rd of January. The biggest hit is to Vodafone Idea, Bharti Airtel and Tata Tele. Bharti Airtel has raised $3 billion this week, so it may be able to tide through. Vodafone Idea has made it clear it's not going to put in any more money and may have to wind up if forced to pay. These companies will go back to the Supreme Court with curative petitions in all likelihood, but their chances statistically are slim. So what next? Will Vodafone Idea have to down its shutters? Should the government step in to rescue the telecom sector? What is the message for foreign investors looking at India, seeing the state of a company like Vodafone Idea? Will Indian telecom industry now move to a duopoly, that is just two major players? Can the government afford to let the telecom sector collapse? Joining me for more on this today are industry veterans, really. Sanjay Kapoor, former CEO, Bharti Airtel and Micromax. Gopal Jain, senior advocate in the Supreme Court. And SS Sirohi, former member of the Telecom Commission. Welcome to all of you. Sanjay, let me begin with your thoughts on what we've seen. To be fair, the review petition was not a 100% chance. There was always a large chance that, the Supreme Court would reject the petition. It often does.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think nobody gave it a very big chance, and everybody knew that there's a slim chance for it to be really changed in any manner. However, this obviously douses hopes, if any, that were there with the incumbents in the market. And at the least, the situation is very precarious, because with the statements given by the shareholders of one of the companies out of the three, if those are true, and that would lead to the industry structure being downgraded from an oligopoly to a duopoly. Which obviously with any stretch of imagination cannot be a positive sign for the whole industry and the entire ecosystem that operates around the industry. It's not an impact on one player, which is really at a stage where they're saying they might shut down, but the players who are going to pay and cough up this money. It is sad that this money, instead of being deployed behind the experience of the consumers, is going to be paid as penalties and interest to the government of India, who actually have been the biggest beneficiaries of telecom industry since its inception, because they've garnered the maximum share. Other operators have really struggled to take back home their investments. But I think what is more important to note here is it will have impact on even the passive infrastructure companies that they hold. What happens to the tower companies who are already fledgling because of lack of tenants on their towers, and if only two are going to left and both of them are going to build their own towers, then the whole purpose behind having an infrastructure company is lost, so they will lose value as well. The biggest really beneficiary of these penalties will be the government, where Vodafone Idea owes a lot of their borrowings to the government. How will they recover those monies? Will it have an impact on the tower companies, which are the residual assets which will remain? And the biggest question is, how do we move from here? Because very clearly now we are moving into a 5G regime, which is about high speed, low latency, Internet of Things. and you can't even afford dark spots for use cases over there, which means the infrastructure that you require is going to be a lot more dense, many more towers, much more in building coverage to give you any 5G use cases. Where is the money for that going to come? And also it will require probably 100 megs of spectrum. That will fall short eventually. And if the spectrum is going to continue to cost what it costs in our country, is there a business case at even the increased prices? If 30% of the top line is going to go to the government on a recurring basis going forward. So I think we have a problem with the past that might get settled with a couple of players, but the bigger problem is how do we take this industry from here? Because there are people all over the country who are dependent for their survival on this industry. Businesses hinge on them, daily lives hinge on them.
Absolutely.
There are value added services that hinge on them, services hinge on them. So I think that's where we are.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Just, for our viewers tuning in and who may not be following the AGR saga that closely, wondering why it's important for them. Let me tell you, it's because of this that telecom tariffs were increased by nearly 47%. Just last month, because these players have to cough up the money and shore up revenues. It is because of those high telecom tariffs that we've seen a spike in inflation numbers as well. So it is connected and it does impact you no matter who you are watching this today. From the legal perspective, Mr. Jain, glad to have you on the show. How do you see this going forward? And my simple question is that if the government, the Department of Telecom, the government of the day, feels that even though they are legally entitled to their full dues by the 23rd of January, no question that they are willing to give a little bit of leeway, because it doesn't look good for any government if a sector collapses. Not right now, not with our economy. Do they legally have the space to do it?
So let's look at it like this. The government wears many hats. It's a policy maker, it's a contracting party, and it has to eventually look at aspects of a sector and the economy as a whole. That is, it has to have a more holistic 360-degree perspective. Second, as far as the license fee aspect is concerned, if there's a final court ruling which says as a matter of interpretation, license fee is payable, obviously the government is entitled to enforce it because it's a direction of the court. If on the other hand there are penalties which are attached to it, and that's a significant amount, and this matter was under various stages of dispute resolution and in courts over this period of time, and there were earlier orders of courts and directions which protected the TSPs, or in fact which had interpreted various heads in their favor, then the government can, in a larger public interest, take the view that long-term survival of the sector, having competition in the sector, having value-added services, and as we go into a 5G regime, as we require more and more broadband and internet penetration, it's important to have a hale, hearty, vibrant and viable sector. Yeah. Then they can say, look, instead of this money going into penalties and interest which they may or may not be able to pay, if this whole thing is plowed back into the telecom sector, into the business, into the networks, right, that's something which will serve their purpose. And I remember in the presidential 2G reference case, the government had taken a very clear position that in sectors like this, we are not looking at revenue maximization as our goal. We are really looking at the sector growing. It has to perform. And at this juncture, the timing is also equally important. A lot of money is owed, let's say, to the banks. Economy, the growth rate has slowed down. We don't want to have a sector going down. We already have the power sector. Many of those companies went down under the IBC tube, and we saw the effect it had on the power sector, on generation capacity, most of which was stressed and stranded. So I think some kind of a holistic, forward-looking, solution-oriented approach is the need of the hour, and that certainly the government can do, and they can even have an expert committee set up which has sectoral experts, economists, legal experts to find a roadmap which serves their larger public policy goals. So I think it's something which is worthy of consideration, and it is something which is really, the ball is in the government's court now to see whether enforcing this and making and getting money, not getting money, players surviving, not surviving, versus giving some kind of stability with the roadmap which fits in with their Digital India, Make in India, Startup India, all the initiatives which are there. So I think this is the context in which the government must consider this aspect.
No, absolutely. And like you said, the government wears many hats. One of those hats also is, going into financial accounting. It will help knowing that there is this revenue coming in. Mr. Sirohi, do you think that the government should give leeway, save jobs, hold out some kind of a lifeboat for Vodafone Idea?
Certainly anyone would like to love that situation where the government is doling out all the stressed people. But that's what government can't do. It's not in the capacity of the government, particularly in the current economic situation, to give money for such kind of purposes. So, secondly, if you decide to really give some relief, which government has already given certain reliefs, beyond that I am talking, if you want to give more relief, what kind of relief you can give? Number one. Number two, how much and to whom? If you are talking about Vodafone Idea, which is the most stressed one, then how much they need? What do they need? And what is my policy? The policy of the nation is NDC, defined in NDCP 2018, which said connect India, propel India, broadband for all by 2022, right? 50 megabits Bps speed for everybody, creating a huge digital infrastructure, adopting next generation technologies so that you can give fillip to 5G, IoT, and all those things, cloud computing, etc. All these things require massive infrastructure, number one, and also massive funds on behalf of those who want to deploy them. So, in any case, for such kind of a massive fund requirement, Vodafone neither is capable at the present moment, nor it will be capable of even after you bail it out. So you are basically trying to revive somebody who doesn't want to see himself live just because he doesn't want to invest. And if government chips in, it will give some more life to it, maybe 1 year, 2 years. How it will survive later on? What are the requirements of funds on this sector? It's a massive capital intensive sector. So once we talk about these things, this is basically not possible, and there is no point at this point of time to even attempt it. Now I am coming to the two duopoly kind of things.
Yeah.
See, and the people say it will be very bad for this thing. Whatever assets are there right now, they will get distributed, or somebody will come and buy it out, whichever way. Even if nobody buys out, it will get distributed. It will be assets can be utilized in a very different manner with some kind of discounts. However, once we talk about duopoly, I want to ask one question. When from 2012 to 2016, when these four operators were there, Airtel, Vodafone, Idea, and Arcom, and so many operators were there. Their revenues were good, and gross revenue was good, and also prices were very high.
Yeah.
Prices were higher than what even now, after 30-40% hike. Today, they were higher than that now. Those were 4 or 5 players. Prices were high. And consumers were getting data for 300 rupees per GB.
Right.
300 rupees per GB. And they were getting the calls for 1 rupee, 2 rupee per minute. So now everything is much better as far as consumer welfare is concerned, as far as sector is concerned.
So are you saying, Mr. Sirohi, 1 minute, I'm going to open up this debate. Are you saying what's wrong with the duopoly? Is that the basis of your argument, that if they're just 2 players, so what?
At this point of time, when disruption is taking place in all the sector of economy, number 1, number 2, and all over the globe, you can't help it. Better embrace it. If you see in India, consolidation is taking place in each and every sector of economy.
Okay.
There are big companies which are consolidating around the big companies. Small companies are not able to cope up.
I'm going to get responses to this very quickly. Who wants to come in? Sanjay Kapoor, do you want to come in to the points that Mr. Sirohi has made?
Yeah, sure. I have my own perspective on this, and we don't have to learn economics from each other. There's enough and more written about it. the more you get towards a monopolistic situation, and oligopoly is closest, duopoly is closest to that, then obviously it's anti-consumer, and it's not very friendly for the ecosystem as well. And finally, for the operators themselves, because their costs will go up, right, each to himself, and eventually it will be high prices, and the decision about taking a service to a particular area will not be really governed by what the consumer wants. The suppliers will really hold a command over how they roll out their strategy. I think the world has experimented all structures. The world and India has experimented all structures. We were a duopoly to begin with. We went down to an oligopoly. We went to a perfect competition. We went to a hyper competition, and then said consolidation in an oligopoly, which is a more proven model all across the world, makes more sense for the whole ecosystem, including the customer, because it puts the right balance that's required to sustain an industry. Now, to distort that structure and take it back to where we were, which is duopoly, which is what Mr. Sirohi was talking about, and that was good for the companies but not so good for the consumers, I think is a retrograde step, and you are downgrading the whole industry structure.
Okay, I want to ask a bigger question, Mr. Jain. What
In the
Mr. Sirohi, okay, I'll come to you. Just let me get a quick question from Mr. Jain. What is the message this also sends out to big companies looking to invest in India? The fact that court case to decide something like what is the base revenue on which charges will be levied can go on for 14 years and then come in as a blow. What is the message that we're actually even sending out?
Look, the message that we should usually send out is, if you are an investor, you have a sector where you're going to, which is viable, where you will get return, which has potential growth, and there's little of baggage and uncertainty, both of which result in needless risk. But today the situation is that, in view of the fact that this verdict has come, which has a huge impact, players who've been in India for years and years are also not likely to survive this onslaught. So I don't see anybody bringing in any fresh capital or investment, and then that message becomes across sectors, not just the telecom sector. So imagine if Vodafone and Idea decide to call it quits. I think that's in terms of timing and messaging, it will send out a distress signal. It will not send out a positive signal, which is why this is the time when you need to put a little bit of a healing touch and balm and find a resolution oriented approach, which according to me is eminently possible. If you look at the IBC as an example, it is also meant for resolution, for continuity. It's not really so much annihilation and liquidation, but effective resolution. So you can apply principles like that. And just to go back to the earlier point, I think competition is so important, it's healthy. Yes, there's been consolidation. It has reduced the sector from having 8 to 10 players to now virtually 3 or 4. So I think we at least need the existing lot to survive and be stable, both for the sector and in the interest of consumers, because then we don't want to have situations of anti-competition, predatory pricing, consumers having no control on services at all. So I think this is the time for the government really to think not as government but governance, which the Prime Minister has always said, and apply that vision for New India to say we want telecom, one of the foremost sectors, poster boys of reform, to heal and to be back where it is and do what it takes. Exactly like they gave a booster shot, they give a fillip, they send out a stimulus before elections, for various sectors in order to gather votes. Now it should be to have health of the sector and to attract investments and to have infusion of capital and for rollout of all their flagship programs, Digital India, Make in India, Startup India, Internet broadband penetration, all of that is very much within the policy goals and objective. So they should think, how do we promote our policy goals and objectives and the role telecom can play in that, and address it from that point of view, and not look at it as a SOP or a bailout, which is the wrong lens to look at it.
Mr. Sirohi, you wanted to come in, and I think you must answer some of the points that have been made here. That can you really afford right now for a major player to have to, shut shop in terms of the job losses it will cause, in terms of the message it will send out?
So there's a compulsion now at this stage because of the business decisions which have went wrong for Vodafone. Airtel is in good position in any case. It will be able to manage it. But what is the Vodafone idea is in distress. That is of their own making. Their even vision of acquiring 4G spectrum, they did not have in the 2015. They refused to acquire 4G spectrum. So you can think of what kind of strategies they were having. Yeah. Whatever mess they have created for themselves, it is of their own making, number one. Number two, see, with how much can the government do? Government has done quite enough now. How much can it do for one particular company in one particular sector?
Is it about one
that's
company,
what's important.
Though?
And secondly,
is it
if
about
they
one
do
company?
it, what?
Is it? Though I want to open up the debate. I have 3 minutes left on the debate, so let's get some views coming in. Is it about one company though? Because you're saying Bharti Airtel is doing fine. It's not really in the pink of health.
It's about the whole.
Their investors, their shares are rising.
Signal that here is a proactive government which steps in.
Yes.
That's
okay. Yeah. Complete your point, Mr. Sirohi. Complete your point.
See, we have to see from the technology point of view, from the digital era. This is digital era. This is the era of disruption. You have to wear a different thinking cap, not the mindset of the old days. We have to innovate and see what can be done for the better.
So I'm not understanding what innovation has to do with a sector on the brink of collapse. Mr. Jain, you want to complete the point that you started. You wanted to complete the point that you started. A lot of old players have already gone. If you're going to count the corpses in the telecom sector, there's going to be a long list. Yes, Mr. Jain, very quickly.
Yes, my short point is government has to have a forward-looking, holistic solution to issues which arise across sectors. They've seen it in the power sector. Now the renewable sector is going down that same path. Telecom may go down the same path. So this is precisely the point when you have to rev up the engines and come up with something which makes it workable, feasible, and it protects the India story. We don't want to have a situation where all sectors are either going down the IBC tube or people are voluntarily pulling out.
Yeah.
That in the present situation would show signs of great ill health. Therefore, we need a booster shot to nurse these sectors back on health, back on track, as I said, keeping the larger policy objectives fixed by the government. Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, the Supreme Court in a judgment, APM terminals or some such thing, always said policy in fact can trump a contract. So government can come up with a customized policy to meet this situation. The license is only a contract, and they can say, look, as far as penalties are concerned, we'd rather that kind of money goes plowed into business for capital infusion.
The judgment came out in September 2019. There was scope for any kind of intervention if that was the intent. Sanjay Kapoor, I have the last 30 seconds to you. Do you see the government?
No, we are now on post.
Okay, on post. Do you see that intent there?
I think given the past track record and the politics and the push and pull involved, it will be very difficult for anybody to revoke the situation. However, an attempt based on what Gopal is saying can be made. I just want to end it by saying the problem has to be seen holistically, where in telecom industry in India, the equation of raw material, investment required, the future technology and obsolescence of technology, the demand for services, move to video and streaming, and the returns on all this is not stacking up for anybody given the government levy stopped on it. The whole equation has to be balanced. If this equation is not balanced, it will be a problem to get investments in this industry.
Well, let's remember, it's not like we can depend on, government services to fill any gap if a big private player goes down either. It's not like they're in the pink of health. The auto sector is already in distress. There are several others. Let not telecom come into an ICU type of situation. We'll watch this space, but I want to thank all of you for joining us on the big debate.
Preventive. It should be preventive and not remedial.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on the big debate.